Hi everybody, welcome back to the Matrix Game of Life. Tonight we're going to begin talking about the infinite and the finite. A lot to cover. However, before we get into it, I'd like to introduce you to my artificial intelligence sponsor once again. Be right back.
Hello, and welcome to the Matrix Game of Life. It is the generosity of viewers like you that makes this channel possible. If you find the information provided as being beneficial, please send a thank you gift. It will be much appreciated. A PayPal link can be found in the description section of all videos. May your Matrix experience be one of health and of prosperity.
Okay, here we go. As stated, tonight's video is entitled The Infinite and the Finite. Now, to be quite honest with you, I could name the next 100 videos the infinite and the finite. Because in actuality, everything that we've talked about up to this point and everything that we'll be talking about from this point on has been about the infinite and the finite. Nevertheless, we're going to break everything down and look at things in much more detail. Now, please understand this. The Matrix Game of Life is real. It is an illusion, but it is a real illusion. Just like if you go to sleep and you have a dream. It's a dream, but it's a real dream. When you dream on the outside of time and space and matter, and on the inside you experience thoughts and feelings and emotions, and of course you have a body. When you awaken from that dream, you realize that the dream was real. You had a dream, but nothing in the dream was real. The content of the dream was not real. Yes, they may have represented things that you know in the waking state, but in a dream state, in a dream, sometimes you can fly. You can fly. You can't do that in the waking state. You have, in a dream state, you're not as constricted by the laws of physics, for one thing, as you are in a waking state. Nevertheless, the dream was real, but it was an illusion. Now, the Matrix Game of Life, and we've been over this, the Matrix Game of Life is itself real. It is a real game. It is being played. You are playing it. It is nevertheless a real illusion. We won't get any deeper into that at this moment. But let's look at this matrix game of life. A, it is a game. B, we call it a game of life. And C, we call it the matrix game of life. I'm just going to touch on this briefly for a moment before we get in to the infinite and the finite. What is the matrix? What is it? Literally. One word. Well, three. The matrix is the mind. It's the mind. Where have we said over and over and over again that the game is played? It's played in the mind. It is a total mind game. A total mind game. Now, like any other game that we play, what is the object of the game? To win. To win the game. Most games that we play to win. Now, you might get into a game of checkers with your grandson or your granddaughter, and you really don't care if you win or if you don't, and sometimes you might even cut them some slack, you know, and allow them to win, to make them happy, to make them happy. So, the goal of the matrix game of life, which you and I are indeed playing, our goal is to win the game. The game hardly makes us happy. In fact, it has just the opposite effect a lot of time. We have snatches of happiness here and there while we're playing it, but it's a hard game. It's a hard game, and we know pain, be it physical pain or intellectual pain or emotional pain. We know pain, we know suffering, be it physical suffering, intellectual suffering, or emotional suffering. We know sickness. And we're all familiar with rot, decay, and the concept of death. That's all part of the game. Our challenge is to win this game. What happens if we win it is something that I'll reserve for later videos to really get into. But as we begin talking about the infinite and the finite, we have to put it in context with how we started out, which was the teachings of the matrix game of life, because they're all connected. Everything's connected. You can't get away from that. Everything is connected. So yeah, we're playing a game. It's called the Matrix Game of Life. It's hard. It's a hard game. We've been playing it a long time. Lifetimes. And the idea of the game is to win it, get out of it, and reap your reward or your penalty. And yeah, there are penalties for doing poorly, and there are rewards for doing well, and great reward for winning. This is a cause and effect universe. And as far as I can see, we're not going to be getting out of this universe anytime too soon. That's another story too. I got a lot of stories. I told myself I didn't want to start getting sidetracked like I have in the past. And for me, as I said, it's hard not to get sidetracked because there's so much to talk about. So much. And we've just started. Okay? So having that gotten out of the way, something else I thought I would mention is how I number my videos. The first 20 videos, if you look at them, in the title you'll see YTV dash, which means YouTube video dash, like 001, 002, 003. And I'm just leaving that alone. But from here on in, what you're going to see is, instead of YTB dash, you're going to see L2V dash. Now, L2 simply designates level 2. All that we've done up to this point has pretty much been level 1. Now we're going to go deeper. We're going to explore deeper. And so I'm calling it L2V dash, in this case, 022. It's my 22nd video. It just happens to take place in level 2. How many levels we're going to ever get to, I have no idea. But just keep that in mind. That's just, I thought I should throw that out there so you're not confused when you see that instead of YTV, L2V. There's a reason for that. What else here? I had to make some notes because another thing I wanted to try to do, like I said, is not get scatterbrained about things and try to keep things consistent and try to keep my videos somewhat shorter. Okay? I'm good at meandering all over the place, and I'm aware of that. It's just that this is a very complex subject. And the information is vast. But this video is entitled, well, here's a pop-up on my screen. I hate those things. This video is entitled The Infinite and the Finite. And we're going to begin this discussion by putting some definitions on these words. And I'm going to begin with the infinite. And I really want you to pay attention. I want you to ponder what I'm saying. I want you to throw it around in there. Think about it. The words infinite and finite are words that most of us have heard all of our life. Some of us have had religious, especially the term infinite, we've had religious concepts that we have built around that word that some may be a little bit accurate, but for the most part, they don't fit. They just don't fit. So I'm going to throw some of these, I made some notes here so I can stay on track. Not have to rely on my aging memory. Okay, infinite and finite definitions. When I speak about the infinite, I'm speaking of source. Consciousness. Consciousness. Consciousness is aware of being aware. Just as you are. Now, rather than using the word source or awareness, or some people would want to use the word God, it doesn't matter. It's the concept that has to get across. The infinite knows only the infinite. In and of itself, it knows nothing finite. Anything finite is a limitation. It's a limitation of the infinite. We'll get into that a little later. So the infinite knows only the infinite itself. It's aware of itself. The infinite knows only the infinite. The infinite is immeasurable. Now, what does that mean? Well, there's a word for that. It's called, it's non-local. non-locality. In other words, it's nowhere, at no time, ever. By being immeasurable, it's like saying, well, how big or how small is it? Those words do not apply. How big or how small as compared to what? Is it the size of a pinhead? No. It has no size. That in itself is a difficult thing to wrap the finite mind around. Difficult. The infinite is eternal. In other words, now another word for eternity, most people see eternity as meaning this really, 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 really long time that somehow had to have a beginning and maybe could have an end. But the word eternity itself actually means timeless. No such thing as time. Time is a finite concept. The infinite holds no concepts. At this point, that gets into a rather difficult transition to make, which is later, but the infinite has no concept of past, present, or future. It doesn't even hold the concept of now. So the infinite is aware of its own infiniteness. It's unbounded, meaning it doesn't have an edge. It doesn't even have a center. It's non-local. It's nowhere at no time. You can't say it's small and you can't say it's big, because you would have to say smaller than what or bigger than what. People like to think of the universe, for example, as being infinite in size. To a degree, the universe can be measured. We measure it in light years with our measuring apparatuses. The distance that light travels in 1 year time, based upon our telescopes and what we can see out there. We have all kind of measuring devices. They measure things. They measure height and width and depth, volume. They measure wavelengths. They measure energy levels. They measure this, they measure that. We're always measuring. We're measuring everything. Only in this universe. But the infinite is immeasurable. It cannot be measured. And there's nothing to compare it to. Now let's look at the finite. What we call the finite. The finite we're all familiar with. It's form, it's time, it's space, it's things, it's concepts, it's thoughts, ideas, it's perception. We perceive a world out there, which is just another way of saying we perceive a universe out there, and we perceive inwardly thoughts, feelings, and emotions. All of those things in their own way can be measured. We know them. They're finite. They're measurable. How often do we hear the term the finite mind? That means that if the mind, our mind, let's say, if our mind is finite, it means it is limited. It is limited to its own activity, which is thought, concepts, ideas, perceptions, outward and inward. Something we know very well. Whether you understand that you're playing a game or whether you don't. It doesn't take much teaching. Until you begin to contrast the finite mind with the infinite. Having said that the infinite knows only itself. It does not know the finite. It does not. Anything finite is measurable. Even if it can be touched, or seen, or heard, or smelled, or tasted, or thought, or known, or felt. this is not, these things are unknown to the infinite, to Source, to God. Call it what you want. They're unknown. The infinite knows only the infinite, and the finite knows only the finite. But not always. Have I confused you enough yet? I hope not. I'm trying to keep this as simple as I possibly can. Now, I'm going to throw a couple diagrams up on the screen. And we're going to talk about those. So I'm going to pause my recording at this moment and do what I have to do to get ready to put those things up there. And once I get them up there, we'll start talking about them. Okay? I'll be back in just a moment. It'll seem that way to you anyhow. To me, it'll be 10 minutes. It'll seem as a moment to you. Hold on. Okay. Now this is a graphic that all of you are familiar with. There's a link to it down below in that drop-down box that you get where it says Show All. Every YouTube has one. I suggest that you print it out for your own reference because we're going to be referring to this diagram a lot in the future. And I don't want to always have to throw it up on the screen because it interrupts the flow of my speech because I have to break my video down into segments just to put something up full screen. And there is another diagram that I'm going to put up. So if you'll bear with me for a moment. Well, before we get into that, let me say this about the diagram that you're looking at. What we're focusing on here, what I'm talking about when I talk about the infinite, is that dark area that surrounds the primary matrix, or the white oval. Because these are digital representations of concepts that no graphic is going to do justice to. It's the best I could do anyhow. Just understand that this gray area outside of that white oval represents Source consciousness, awareness, the infinite. And what we're going to look at next are these little star-like clusters with the F inside of them. This stands for the Source Fractal. And excuse me a minute, and I'll throw that graphic up on the screen and we'll talk about it, okay? 1 second. Just give me a second. All right, we have that up there now. This graphic has everything to do with the source fractals. It says here, source core, that's just terminology I use, the core of source, call it like, I don't know, the brain, the core of source, which is the origin of the I concept and duality. The origin of the I concept and duality are things that I'm going to be talking about later, because it gets involved. This is a scalar teaching. The more we get into it, the more involved it gets. I'm just laying out basic stuff right now. But if you see all those little BB-like things stretched across the graphic here, those are us. Those are the source fractals. They're the source fractals. You could call it a collective consciousness. I'm sure you've heard that word. What a collective consciousness is. It's like if you live in the United States of America, among all the people that live there, there is this collective consciousness that Joe Biden is president. Okay? That we, for the most part, experience 4 seasons: spring, summer, winter, and fall. Or fall, whatever, 4 seasons. That's a collective conscious concept. We experience that there are male and female, and now transgender and what have you. There's a collective consciousness about that. About many things, we share a collective consciousness. We're like-minded, so to speak. There are limitations to a collective consciousness, quite a few. More numerous than could be numbered, actually. Now, the source fractals are eternal, along with source core. We were never created, nor will we ever end, so to speak. We have all the attributes of source. But with one exception. We are precipitated out, so to speak, out of source in the form of mind. Each of us, as we play this game or as we live our lives in general, we are under the assumption that each of us have our own individual mind. And to a degree, that is true. From another perspective, it is not true at all. There is only one mind and many precipitations of that mind, giving the appearance that we have our own separate minds, that each source fractal has its own separate mind. in a way it does. Look at it this way. You watch a rainstorm. Every drop of rain is coming from the same cloud. The cloud is water, the raindrop is water. They're the same thing. The cloud has just taken on a fractalized form that appears to us as rain droplets. Rain. The same thing is going on right here. We are each precipitated from the same thing. We are the same thing that precipitates us. It just appears to us that we have what is called individuality and an individual mind, which at our level of experience is true. It's true. From the highest concept, from the infinite perspective, there is no such thing as mind, period, let alone precipitants of it. But that's another story. We'll get there. So I wanted us to look at this because we are talking about the infinite and the finite. The only way that the infinite can know the finite is through a fractal of itself. Remember back in my beginning videos that I said that I came to understand that my job, my function, is to experience. And that whatever I experience, Source experiences. Why? Because I am Source, and so are you. But there's a fine line that has to be dealt with in order to make all that very clear. Because, read along with me here. All, not something, some, all occurs within Source. If you look back at the original graphic we were looking at, it talks about our source self-fractals created the primary matrix, the universe, within Source. Within the immeasurable. Oh, that alone could keep you up for weeks. All occurs within Source. All things that appear to exist appear only as thought forms in the unfathomable mind of Source. And I'm taking a liberty there by saying the mind of Source. I'll explain that in whatever video not long from now that I explain that. Source is consciousness, and consciousness is aware of its own being. That the being doesn't mean it's a man or a woman, or it is. It is aware of its isness. It's aware of its isness. There is no thing apart from Source, nor does anything move out of Source. Everything that appears to exist or appears to happen exists or happens only within the imagination of Source. There again, I took a liberty. Because, like I said, English, we are limited to language, and so we got to use words. We have to supply words in order to speak. I took a liberty when I said mind of Source. I've taken a liberty there. When I say imagination of Source, I've taken a liberty there. The universe and all that the universe appears to hold. We're talking about form now. Including you and me. As things appear to us, as we perceive ourselves to be, as we perceive form. Space, time, matter, form, all the rest of it. Appears nowhere other than within the mind of Source, a liberty, which is one and not two. I'm talking about here mind. It's one thing, it's not two. It appears that way, but it's an illusion. This is a mind game. And I say here, this is an extremely difficult concept to grasp. The human ego, the persona, the fact that we all have an apparent body compounds that difficulty. But know this, nothing actually exists other than Source. And you are that. Eternally, timelessly. So, welcome to the infinite and the finite. The infinite is the unseen that's seen everywhere in the concept of forms. The things you dream when you go to sleep on your bed, the things you dream, the dream is real. The forms that are dreamed are not. They're illusions, constructs of your own mind. You wake up into what we call the waking state. You go, oh, that was just a dream. You can dream you see somebody get hit by a car and wake up. You get up out of bed then and go call an ambulance? No. It happened in your dream, but it wasn't real. It was an illusion, a construct of your own mind, temporary and fleeting. This matrix game of life, it's a real game. But what happens in it is an illusion. It's a mind game. The game itself and the mind are two. They are also illusions. The question now is, who or what is having this illusion. Well, that's where we're going when we talk about the infinite and the finite. Like I said, there's a lot to be said, a lot. And I hope we've gotten off to a very basic working platform that we can start building upon. And like I said in my other videos, if what I say seems to be repetitive, it has to be. Because when you start talking, speaking, relating things that are infinite, and it has to be done through and to a finite mind, I don't know of a harder undertaking that one can have. I've heard it said, and it's true, that the most noble undertaking that a human being can pursue is studying and coming to the knowledge of the nature of the mind. And I'll leave it at that. And I'm going to leave this video at that, because I am going to try to keep my videos a little bit shorter anyhow, and a little bit more concise. So I hope that I've given you some food for thought. Download the graphics, save them as pictures. Wherever you save pictures, you can print them, you can look at them, you can do anything you want with them. And again, I'll mention that you watch the link, you watch the video. It's a YouTube video. I have a link to it, to a talk given by Mr. Rupert Spira. I'm not talking about anything new here. In his video, he's talking about the same thing. He's very eloquent at it. But he's also, because he's at a conference, he has a fixed amount of time that he can speak about these things. Although he does have a YouTube channel also, all of his own, where he's constantly talking about these things, but not the way I'm doing it. He's always answering questions that are asked him by attendees of the many conference workshops that he holds all over the world. And he uses a lot of analogy, and you can see that the questioners, the people that are asking him questions, are usually as stumped after his answer as they were before they asked the question, and he knows that. This is not easy stuff. It isn't, because we are so conditioned to this world and the ways of the world that to break through that conditioning is difficult. It takes a jackhammer and then some dynamite. It's hard to break through our conditioning, but it has to be done if you want to arrive at the truth of what you are. Know thyself. The operative word in there is self. And I say that use whatever word you use. Here, I'll use the word God. God is the self of all selves. You are not you, but you are God, and there is no you. You never were, nor never will be. I had a whole video about that. And you won't find me moving away from that concept. It's the truth. So, I'll see you the next time that I see you. Until then, may your matrix game experience be one of health, wealth, and prosperity. Remember, it is a mind game. The activity of the mind is thought. Take control of the thoughts that you entertain and start making wise choices. Raise your frequency and your game will improve. It's a game. Play to win. All right, check you out later. Bye.